On the road. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the regular board meeting of the Truckee Donner Public Utility District. It is 6:01 Wednesday, August 20th, 2025. Call to order. Could we get a roll call, please?
Sure. Director Morrell?
Here.
Director Randall?
Here.
Director Bender?
Here.
Vice President Laliotis?
Here.
President Pitt?
Here. Thank you. Next on the agenda is the pledge. Let's see. Bender, you did it last time. Dr. Morrell, would you like to lead us today?
Of course. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Brian, do we have any changes to the agenda tonight?
There are no changes this evening.
Okay, great. Public comment. So this is time that is set aside for the public to comment on any matter that's not on the agenda. So any agendized matter should be addressed at the time that we are talking about that item. So is there any public comment tonight?
My name is Brian Helm. I just wanted to provide comment today. I wasn't sure whether it was going to get agendized. I just wanted to speak in support of.
If I may interrupt, if you could just hit the button at the bottom with the light, it'll turn green so there.
Oh,
thank
yeah,
you.
got it. I was looking for a button, and it's just sort of a pressure touch. Name is Brian Helm. Here to just, I wasn't sure whether it's going to be agendized or not, to support creation of a community solar pilot program to improve feasibility and utility of PV systems on multifamily and residential projects. We are a development and construction firm based here in Truckee called Paradigm 8. We recently, in partnership with Sage Modern, who's also a design build firm that works in this area, in partnership with Town of Truckee, had a workforce housing project called Edmonds Lofts approved at Town Council for the piloting and creation of 12 deeded workforce housing projects. And as part of that, it's an all-electric design, energy efficient, and with Title 24, as I'm sure you guys know, PV systems are becoming larger and larger parts of these projects. One of the challenges with these projects is because of the need to have individual meters per unit, and then in our case, we have an 18 kW system. It adds about $20,000 or about a little more than 20% to the cost of the PV system to then distribute the benefits of that solar across the units. And with the idea of it being workforce housing, we're trying to keep the cost of living, the cost of the residential housing down as much as possible. And so in talking with staff at the PUD, the Community Solar Pilot Program is a really great solution to that, which allows us to put in 1 meter per unit, plus a meter for the house, plus a meter for the solar system, and then to designate a percentage utilization of that PV across the system. So sort of a win-win. We sort of comply with all of the existing rules of TDPUD with the meters, and then we also have the lowest cost PV system possible, and then distribute the lower cost of living across our workforce housing units. So we submitted a letter. I know that Jared had been working on this program, and we're looking to break ground this fall. And so we just encourage you all to take that matter up sometime in the future and pilot that program, and we'll look forward to participating in it. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Helm? Okay, thank you for your comment, Mr. Helm. I did read the letter that was sent, and I believe that we're all supportive of finding solutions for these issues. Thank you. Very good. Any other public comments today? Seeing none. Moving on to director updates. Directors, do we have any? Directors?
If I could interrupt.
Yes, please do.
There was one public comment submitted via email through our portal. It has been forwarded to the Board of Directors district email account,
Okay.
just to make you aware of that.
Was that not the same letter?
No,
The Paradigm 8
Development Group comment letter was an email direct to the board of directors.
Okay.
We had one public comment written that was submitted through our portal. Staff's recommendation is to allow staff to reach out to that comment and resolve that matter.
Thank you very much. Which now brings us to director updates. Does anybody have anything they'd like to share this week? Director Morales, no?
I do.
Please.
Just want to wish our softball team luck in the playoffs tonight.
Yeah. Excellent.
So, go Thunderstorms.
Awesome. That's it. Okay. Anything on this end?
Just maybe on that public comment, that other public comment, we're not going to discuss it at all, but maybe consider at some point in the future looking at our policies for, what am I trying to say? Yeah, well, regarding that, just maybe just a workshop maybe in the future or something. I know we're going through the financial stuff. I had a customer contact me maybe a year ago about this. So now this is the second one. So now it's kind of, maybe we should take a look at some of our policies in the near future regarding this, because they are pretty strict, because we set them up, when COVID, when we were over $250,000 in back pay. So I don't know what the solution is, but maybe we could talk about it at a board level at some time in the future.
Absolutely. I think there's an opportunity. We have, as a board and general manager team, have identified the need to review policies on several different fronts, update them to make sure they're still applicable to the current circumstances and conditions. And as you mentioned, not to be cryptic, but I think the discussion you're talking about is our billing policies with reference to deposits and auto pay opportunities
Yes,
for
yep.
for our customers.
Yep.
So we can definitely bring back an item for board consideration.
Okay.
And I'm going to apologize because I last checked my email at like 4. And I didn't read this comment somehow. But we'll all get on the same.
Yeah, all good.
We'll all get together and we'll talk about these things for sure. I do have a quick update as well. The first is that I did attend the UAMPS member conference these past couple of days. It was really full of a lot of information. What I don't know can be contained in an AI data center. It's a tremendously dense topic, all the things that UAMPS does, we discuss things from the hardening of distribution and hardening of public service, to, the new organized markets that are emerging, to transmission and grid topics and wholesale electric markets. It was really a very educational couple of days for me. So yeah, I always recommend it if you have an opportunity to attend a few of those opportunities. And a second thing that I wanted to bring up is maybe a couple of Friday or two ago, a dump truck drove down High Street, across Jaboom Street, and pulled the wires and ripped up like 4 poles all along Jaboom Street. Boom, 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 boom. It was like Godzilla. And it was really something. And the wires, whoosh, they're not ours. Okay, it was AT&T lines, but people don't know that, right? When a pole goes down, you don't know what. And so there were lines all over the road for a little while there. And we watched people drive over them and ride over them on their bike. And it was a heart attack, like Gene's like running out the road, stop, 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 stop. And the guy like runs over the line and gets off his bike, one wheel on one side, one wheel on the other side of that line. So I'm thinking that it might be useful to this community to have a little education around downed lines and how you should behave. And, and he had a child on the back of his bike. I mean, I am telling you, the adrenaline there was intense. But if that had been electric, it might have been a really different afternoon. So I'm just sort of bringing up that topic. Maybe that is some, like everybody doesn't have enough on their desk, but this is a really important public safety thing. And if we've got community members that are are working on that level of misunderstanding. I think we need to maybe do a quick community. If you are near a downed line, this is what you should do, and this is what you should not do. So I just wanted to put that out there. And that's my public comments for tonight. Yeesh. Okay, so that brings us to item number, well, our consent calendar. Do we have any public comment on consent? Seeing none. Do we have any directors who have questions, comments, or need to pull something on consent? Okay, in which case, I would happily entertain a motion.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Very good. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? No? Okay, the motion passes. Great. We are just zooming right along here. And this brings us to the first action item of the evening, which is number 15, consideration of Resolution 2025-20, declaring the district's endorsement of Truckee Library Bond Measure G. And it looks like we have Mr. Poncelet to give us some more information.
Great. Good evening, President Finn, members of the board. I'm presenting action item 15. I would like to recognize that we do have some friends of the library in the audience today, so thank you for coming. All right, the new project, it's a local grassroots initiative, replaces aging and undersized library facility. The new regional library design is 20,000 square feet and a modern library design. It's a partnership between the Friends of the Library, the town of Truckee, and Nevada County. And the vision is to serve as a hub for connection, creativity, and collaboration. That's a rendering of the library, the location in the regional park. The district board has taken prior action to execute parcel lot line adjustments on district-owned properties to accommodate the location. There's a rendering of what the library might look like. There's a lot of milestones that have been achieved to date. The library schematic design is in process with the town to secure a development permit. The library formed a joint powers authority, and obviously that's a structure we're familiar with organizations like NCPA and NCPA or the Housing Agency, the JPA. They formed a community facilities district as the taxing vehicle to place a bond measure on the ballot. They're working to secure total costs of projects estimated to be between 30 and 38 million, and that breaks down into 10 million in private philanthropy, and they've raised 3 million as of March. Bond measure G is estimated to be between 16 and 19 million, and then foundations and grants and philanthropy to make up the rest. The bond measure G is slated to appear on the November 4th special election ballot, and the district has a history of working with the town, Truckee Donner-Reckon Park, and Truckee Sanitary District to help support this project from the land and our ownership efforts. So the library JPA has reserved a 5-year lease option to secure land between the district and the library JPA for a portion of the parcel currently leased to Truckee Donner-Reckon Park. And bond measure G is a significant funding milestone for moving this project forward, and the library project has received formal endorsements from many private and public entities. The town at their meeting last week did endorse. There is no direct fiscal impact with adoption of this resolution, and the recommendation is to adopt resolution number 2025-20, the district's formal endorsement of the Truckee Library Bond Measure G, and we'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Do we have any public comments on this item?
Thank you, Steve, for that presentation, and directors, thank you for the opportunity to be here. That presentation gives most of the content, but what I wanted to share is a little bit of context. For those of you that I have not yet met, I'm lucky enough to know all of the directors here, but those also in the audience. My name is April Cole. I'm the director of the Friends of the Truckee Library. And I'm here tonight really just to thank you for all of your support to date. As you saw that parcel with the library site on it, it was an extraordinary act of collaboration and community benefit for PUD to be so supportive to get us to that point. And I want to say that we're here today standing to make this request and have this request in front of you because of the work that you guys have done. And it means a lot. When I talk about being proud of putting this library project together for the community, I'm not just proud to develop a library. I am really, really proud of that. I think communities are great when they have great libraries. But what I'm especially proud of is the collaboration that we have seen and the way that our community has come together emotionally, supportive, but also just smart, effective, efficient management of community funds. When we look at all the different districts that we have in Truckee, you guys know, it's complicated. There's a lot going on, and yet this project has really brought everybody together to the table. And I think when I look at Measure G, the first thing I thought of was great, because I think that we're a great community because of what we've done together to get us to this point. So that's my public comment. I want to say thank you.
Thank you, April.
And my name is Kathleen Egan. I'm on the board of the Friends of the Truckee Library, but I'm here tonight as a member of the Vote for Truckee Measure G campaign committee, so the bond campaign committee. I just want to say one of the things that's really unique about this project is the funding structure. It's not only Measure G, which funds maybe 43% of the total project, but it's also private capital coming in and other agency and foundation support coming in. And the combination of those three is truly unique, and it really provides a rare opportunity for a maximum benefit for every taxpayer dollar that is secured for this. And that's why Measure G is so important. It's really critical for us to pass it. So if you're positive to vote this evening, we're hoping you will vote positively. It will go a long way to show that collaboration and demonstrate to the voter that this isn't just the Friends of the Truckee Library and a handful of individuals, but it's really the community as a whole that's bringing this project together. So we look forward to your vote. We hope it's positive, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathleen. Okay, any other public comments? Seeing none, board comments or questions, discussion? Yeah, please.
I just want to say that I personally endorsed this project, and so I believe in libraries and what they do for communities. I have lived in a community that had a little library like we have and built a brand new one in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. And so along the river, very similar to the scenario that we have here in Truckee, and it's really terrific for the whole community. So I'm really in favor. I work with teenagers at Truckee High and young adults, and I'm promoting, do you know that we're having a new library? Oh, yes, I do. Or, oh, my sister's on the committee for it, or this or that. So anyway, I'm in favor of it. I do have one question, though, and silence that. Apologies. The old building. I don't know if you can answer this, or our friends from the library. Is there any funding from the old building? And does that go into the pool of fundraising? I don't even know who owns it. I'm not even sure if I can ask that. It's a little bit outside of the, but I'm just curious.
That's been a topic of discussion with the county. It hasn't been resolved yet. Their position is they really need it for their own expansion. And so that's part of the issue. And of course, we would like to see it come in, but that's hopefully we will be able to come to a resolution on that. But they need it for their own expansion. It's one of the reasons we can't expand the current library is it's so, the area for their capability of performing county functions is so limited. There's no room to expand any of those buildings unless, and they could really use that for any future expansion they have.
Well, I'm thrilled that the collaboration that you're talking about between the town of Truckee and Truckee Donner PUD, as well as Friends of the Library, was able to come together into a much grander project. So for the community, it's really terrific. That's all I have.
Thank you, Director Morrell.
So thank you for your comments. I think I totally agree. This has been a great collaboration. I feel in this regard, we have, by the actions we've taken over the last couple years, that, we feel strongly about this project in a positive manner. And I as well personally support Measure G, endorsed it. But as a whole in this organization, I feel like our support has been there since day one, because we believe in it. And our actions to date have supported that. And I feel like this is a natural progression to move on to supporting the bond measure. So I'm fully in support.
Thank you, Director Laliotis. And to my right.
I support the library. I supported it when I was the general manager of Parks and Rec, which springboarded them to getting the land, and we won't go into the particulars of where it is now. I personally endorsed it. I will abstain on this vote because I think government needs to remain neutral on measures like this.
Thank you, Director Randall. Director Bender.
All right, good to see you both tonight, and always been in support of the library, and I'm in support. So really, as I've been saying with my guys lately, vamonos, let's go. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Bender. Yeah, I am also in agreement with much of what's been said here tonight. I do feel like we have a vested interest at this point. We've put time and money, and I want to see it come to fruition. So, yeah, I will be super excited when it does. In which case, do we have a motion?
I'll move staff's recommendation.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
Oh, okay, we got all the ayes, okay. And we have one abstain. Very good. Thank you very much, everyone.
President Finn,
Yes, sir.
before we leave this item, if you'd indulge me, I'd like to clear my throat.
You're welcome
I
to.
wanted to provide some guidance to the board members.
Okay,
If, as Director Morell indicated, she supports and has endorsed the measure, as individual directors, you can support and endorse the measure. You can engage in political activities in support of the measure. You can participate in phone banks or email banks if that's such a thing. But what you can't do is you can't use public resources when you're engaging in public activity. So let's say you leave the meeting tonight and you want to go to a Measure G phone bank and you happen to have your PUD issued laptop and say, you know what, I can just shoot out a bunch of emails to people I know. That's a no-no. You can't use any district issued equipment. You can't be in uniform when you are engaging in political activities, your PUD uniform. It's unclear whether Director Laliotis's PUD issued shirt with the PUD logo would be considered a uniform, but I think just to be extra cautious, I think I'd recommend that you not wear a PUD issued shirt with a logo on it. And finally, if you were, for example, to lend your name as an endorsement and have it listed, sometimes officials like to list their public or official title, TDPUD director, for identification purposes. That's okay, but you have to be careful to make sure that it's clear that if you're speaking and identifying yourself as a board member, that you're making it clear that you're speaking as an individual and personally only, and not representing the district in any form or manner. And so my recommendation is that if, for example, you're going to write an article to be published in the paper, and you wanted to identify yourself as a PUD director, and you made it clear in that article that the opinions that you're expressing are those of your own and don't reflect the PUD, that's okay. But if you're going to have your name listed in a list of people who endorse the measure, my suggestion and recommendation is that you not list your official title as part of that listing, because it's not clear whether or not you're doing that in your individual or your official capacity. So I just wanted to provide some guidance there and some guardrails, and we don't have to do it now, but if any of you have questions about what you can't do, I'd be happy to answer them.
Right on.
And
Thank you
just
very
under full
much.
disclosure, I endorsed under me personally. No title, no nothing.
Excellent. We'll
Just
give
a
you a gold
Truckee
star for
resident. One of 16,000.
Right.
So, full disclosure right there.
Gold star.
Yes. Well, thank you for those reminders and keeping us on the right side of all the lines. We appreciate that. Okay. I think we're good. Which means we can move on to the first of our workshops. Thank you, ladies. Have a good night. Okay, our first workshop of the evening, item number 16, is the 2025 Water Utility Cost of Service Rate Study presentation. So we're going to get a whole bunch of numbers all night. It's a theme. It's a theme tonight, which is often a theme.
So in this workshop item, we're going to talk about the public process for water utility rates, and we're going to update the board on our rate study that's been ongoing for several months now. Feels like a year. In a little bit more background, in 2020 was the last time we talked about water rates at an official capacity to approve them. The board adopted ordinance 2020-02, setting water rates for 5 years, 2021 through 2025. With the following average rate increases presented here on the screen. I looked back at the previous 5 years, and it was a 6.5 and 3.33, average of 4% on the previous 5 years through 2020. So we have HDR Engineering has prepared a presentation for this workshop to facilitate a review and discussion of various water rate options, including resulting impacts on reserve balances. And with that, I'd like to introduce Sean Korn with HDR Engineering, and I'll pull up his presentation. All right. Thanks for joining us, Sean.
Thank you, President Finn, directors. Appreciate the opportunity to be here with you again, talking about water rates. So as Mike mentioned, this goes back to the prior studies we've completed for the district for the last 10 years. So I think maybe 3 cycles in there, might be 15, I can't remember now. So many of you are familiar with this. But as we go through this, what we'll talk about this evening is some of the key assumptions that have changed since last time. So a couple of the key drivers that we saw as we walked into this study and started putting the analysis together was the levels of inflation that we've all seen, not just at the district, right across our personal lives. Some of that during the pandemic, as well as continuing increases in inflation on the capital side of the equation, where we still have some supply chain challenges. We still have increasing capital costs as we go forward. We do have an identified capital plan. I'll talk about that a little bit more, but you recently completed or in the process of completing a master plan for the water utility. And then as we go through this, we also want to make sure we maintain our prudent financial metrics and criteria. So maintaining adequate reserves as we go forward. I have the infamous smiley face slide in here somewhere. So we do have that discussion as we go through that, as well as adequately funding capital and maintaining other financial metrics that we'll touch on. As we looked at this, our revenue requirement, which I'll explain in more detail for fiscal year 25, is approximately $20.6 million. As we go forward, that increases up to $27.9 million based on inflation. We have about a 4.8% annual inflationary assumption built in over the next 5 to 10 year window. Our operating expenses are based on the current budgets and the work that district staff have been doing as you're going into the budgeting process right now. And we have about $8.9 million annually in capital improvement needs. And I'll touch on that a little bit more. The result of all this, giving you the results here up front, is 6.5% annual revenue adjustments in each of the next 5 years. And I'll show you what those look like to your average customer rates. And really our process and requirement here is to meet Proposition 218 so that we have the administrative record, the proportionality of how we charge the customers. So what that fixed charge is, what that consumption charge is, so we can meet those requirements. So I'll walk through the purpose of the rate study, overview of the process, give you a little background on how we meet those requirements of Prop 218, and then we'll go through the rate study results and summary and next steps. So as we go through this, our goal is to develop an analysis that supports the generation of revenues to meet your operating and capital costs that have been identified and maintain the service levels of the water system as we go forward. We also, as I've mentioned, need to meet the intent of Prop 218 and those requirements of having cost-based and proportional rates. And I touched on our financial planning criteria as well. So rolling those into our analysis to support the long-term financial sustainability of the district and the water utility specifically here this evening. We do this using generally accepted methodologies, but this is based on your specific system, customers, and information. So this is all around how you provide water service to your customers, how and why you incur costs to provide that level of water service. So to do that, it's a 3-step process: a revenue requirement, cost of service, and rate design. That revenue requirement is your financial plan. So what are those total revenue needs, as I've mentioned, to support operating and capital costs? Our cost of service is to meet the requirements of proportionality for Proposition 218. So is there a different cost to serve a different type of customer? In your case, we have 2 rate schedules essentially, residential and non-residential. And is there a difference to provide service? And this has been the challenge with Prop 218 over the last 10, 15 years with the challenges, legal challenges that have been going on with this. Once we know our overall revenue needs and then how that's proportionally distributed, then we can design rates for each of our identified customer classes of service. So again, looking at residential, non-residential, and then we have the pumping rate as well as part of this. So just a quick refresher on Prop 218. It's a California constitutional amendment designed to protect taxpayers by limiting the methods by which local governments can create or increase taxes, fees, and charges without taxpayer consent. Now, what's been interesting over the years is it is not prescriptive on how we've identified cost-based and now proportionality in the most recent challenges. Really what it talks about is that the fees or rates in this case should not exceed the reasonable cost of providing service. That's our revenue requirement, right? We have identified the costs we need to support to provide water service to your customers. And then we develop the cost of service so that we don't exceed the proportional cost of providing that service. So each customer class is being treated proportionally. Really what it comes down to is our average unit cost. So cost per month per meter size and cost per each consumption unit. And that's that nexus or the relationship that we have to provide through this as part of it. So when we have the revenue requirement and cost of service, it's going to give us those unit costs. Those become the rates in year 1. So those are the fixed charges. Those are the consumption charges. Years 2 through 5, as an example, for another 5-year Prop 218 window, would just be the percentage adjustments increasing those rates that we've identified and set for our first year, which will be fiscal year 2026. So our revenue requirement or our financial plan, again, really just compares our revenues to expenses. We take into consideration our prudent financial planning criteria. We do look out over a 10-year window. So we have a 10-year model. We focus on the next 5 years for rate setting purposes. That's typically what agencies like you adopt rates for. Some folks do shorter time frames. Most folks don't go past 5 years as part of that. Again, this is water. Water revenues pay for water expenses. So it's on a standalone basis, right? We're not subsidizing water, as an example, with electric revenue from your electric rates. This is just water as we go forward. And we use what's known as the cash basis, and I'll touch on that here in a moment. Some of the key assumptions based on our fiscal year 25-26 budget. Again, I talk about that 4.7, 4.8% annual inflationary level going out from those budgeted figures in 25 and 26. We do have a projection of rate revenue. That's some of the independent work that we do as part of a study, is we calculate those projected revenues based on the number of customers, how much consumption they've used for the total system, and we calculate that out as part of the study. And that's important because that provides the basis for our revenue, as well as our distribution of costs, as well as the design of rates. So we use the same units throughout the entire process going forward. As we started working on the technical analysis and looking at that capital funding plan, then we worked with staff based on that recently completed master plan, and then staff worked through that process of how those were prioritized and really smoothed a bit to kind of minimize the impacts to rate in any one year. So as I mentioned at the beginning, 6.5% each year. So if we front load that capital plan, we need a much higher rate increase in the initial years. And then it could be lower in the out years. As we looked at this and worked with staff, that has been smoothed over the 5 years for even adjustments going forward. We are not issuing any new debt. This is all funded through annual rate revenues or through available reserves. And you'll see kind of how that picture looks here in a moment. And then we've developed that rate transition plan, the 6.5s, to maintain our operating and capital funding needs, as well as meeting our prudent financial metrics based on industry standard approaches, as well as the board and district's financial policies that you've tried to achieve as we go through these studies. This is our revenue requirement cash basis I mentioned. The top box is our revenue requirement, and the bottom box is our capital funding approach. Key to the capital funding in that bottom box is looking at what those capital projects are and how they're going to be funded. So do we have, as an example, long-term debt? Right? No, we don't in this case. So how are we paying for those projects? That bottom line, capital projects funded from rates, goes back up to the green box. That is a direct rate impact that I'll show you here in a moment as well. Our financial policy or financial metric is that we need to be reinvesting in the system on an annual basis that is at least greater than our annual depreciation expense. That's the floor, because what that represents is the cost of those water infrastructure that has been out there for 20, 30, 50, 80 years. To replace that infrastructure, it's 2.5, 3 times the cost today from what that original cost is. So our goal here is to transition that in. The district has always done a really good job of rate funding capital over the years. So we do have a strong metric here, and we've continued that as part of this analysis going forward. So here is that capital improvement funding plan. You see our current year, fiscal year 25, running just below $6 million. And then as I mentioned, FY 26 through 30, our average is $8.9 million. We have a little peak in 26. The colors here, the first bar is our rate funded capital. So we are funding $7 million or more starting in 26 of our $8.9 million of capital. Very strong financial metric and maintaining the financial stability of the water utility going forward. We have a little bit of orange, which is pulling out of reserves. We have a little bit of purple, which is our facility fee reserves. So those facility fees reserves and revenue in those are there to support some of the expansion and making things larger to support new customers going forward. And then we have some green, which is the vehicle fund reserve. So as part of the analysis, we put money into the vehicle reserve, and then we take it out to pay for those vehicles as we go through this 5-year window as part of that. And then we have a little bit of operating cash. I think it's such a small sliver you can't even really see it in it. So, excuse me. So capital is typically our largest driver of our rate study, especially as you start looking at that lumpiness. In this case, staff has gone back and prioritized and smoothed that capital plan. What you see here is our summary of our revenue requirement. So the bottom part of this chart, the blue, is our operating expenditures. So you see that starts at just under about $14 million, and then that ratchets up over the years based on our inflationary assumptions. The red is the blue from the prior here. So that equals the bottom blue on this slide. And so that's our capital funding. Then we have our green, which is our net debt service. And this is net debt service because a portion of those facility fee revenues offset some of the existing debt that you have in place today. So it's not an impact to the overall rate levels because we're funding that with facility fee revenues. There's a little line on top, transfers. It's a little purple line. That is, part of that is the vehicle replacement fund. So taking those funds as part of our overall revenues and putting them into our vehicle replacement reserve, which are then pulled out in the capital plan to fund those vehicle and equipment purchases. The horizontal black line, that is our current level of revenue. So in 2025, revenues equal expenses. So good budgeting, right? That's what our goal is here. And then as you go across, you see as our O&M increases, our rate-funded capital needs to increase to fund those capital improvement projects. Our debt service stays the same, no new debt as part of this, and then just transfers. That dashed line is then our proposed rate revenue line. So that's that 6.5% each year that needs to be increased to fund our operating and capital needs going forward. You see down on the bottom chart, we have our years, we have our current average bill, assuming a 3/4 inch meter and 5,000 gallons per month. So typical residential customer on an annual average in the summer, customers can use a lot more. But on our annual average, we're looking at that. That bill is $109.73, so just under $110. And then just increasing by the 6.5%, you can see how that average bill would increase over the 5-year window as part of this. So here, looking at our reserves, as we talked about, the blue bottom part that's kind of coming down, that's our available reserves after funding capital. The black line that's increasing, that is our target reserve balance. So that's our goal. We would like to have reserves at that level. What you can see here over the 5-year window is we drop down just under $10 million with the 6.5% increases built into the revenue assumption. So what does it look like here? Here we go. We go in the Wayback Machine to the infamous smiley face slide. And you can see at the end of the 10 years, we are getting up to, with the adjustments in the out years as well, we are looking at getting back to that target policy over the long term. So again, part of this, as we work through the capital funding, looking at our overall O&M expenses, is trying to minimize that risk, maintain our financial sustainability over the long term by keeping our long-term reserves at a level that appears to be appropriate going forward. So the question we always get, well, how does this compare to everybody else? Which is not how we set rates, but it's a piece of information that is good to look at and see how your rates compare to your neighbors. So going across the bottom, we've got the average of everybody. We have your present rate, the proposed rate for next year only. And then we have North Star, Tahoe City, Olympic Valley, North Tahoe, South Tahoe, and Alpine Springs. Now, key to this is understanding that each of those other agencies have at least 3 years left of rate increases on an approved Proposition 218 process. So in the last 12 months, Alpine Springs adopted a 5-year plan. North Tahoe PUD adopted a 5-year plan. Tahoe City adopted a 5-year plan. And North Star was a little older. I think they have 3 years left, and South Tahoe has 3 years left. For the most part, I think with the exception of North Star, everybody was somewhere between 9 and 11% annually. So South Tahoe PUD, as an example, front-loaded their first adjustment and then brought the rest down to 9s as part of that. North Tahoe PUD running at 10 and 11% a year, each year for water and sewer for them for a 5-year period. So while your rate is also going up, all of these rates will also be going up into the future as well from a comparison standpoint. Again, your rates are based on your costs, what you're funding, and your customers' use of the system going forward. So to summarize, our rate adjustments are necessary to adequately fund our operating and capital needs for the water utility. Our capital improvement plan is funded through rates and available reserves, including facility fees, and again, no long-term borrowing. We've maintained our financial metrics and policies, again, not quite meeting that reserve fund target, but we do have a plan to get that back where it is. Now we know the overall cost. The next step is how do we distribute that proportionally between customers and come back to our average unit cost. So what is a cost of service? Well, it's an analysis to proportionally distribute those costs, the revenue requirement, to each identified customer class of service. And we do this because I don't know of any utilities that track cost by customer, right? We put a water main down the street. We don't have a residential water main and a commercial water main. It's a system that has joint benefits to all customers. So our cost of service to meet that proportionality requirement of Prop 218 looks at how each customer class on average So all the residential, all the commercial, how they impact the system going forward. And ultimately determines if are there subsidies where one customer class's rates need to go up more than the others, and development of those average unit costs to support the development of the proposed rates for the Prop 218 process. So we do this because we need to meet Prop 218. We've had additional efforts and analysis to illustrate how and why we incur those costs by customer classes of service. And then ultimately, this brings us back to our rate structure components of the fixed charge and the consumption charge. So here's the results of the cost of service. Starting on the top chart, you'll see revenues at present rates going down the chart, allocated revenue requirement, that is that total revenue requirement, how is that split between residential, commercial, and pump zones, and then the balance or deficiency. Now, our goal, and this came out very nicely again this year, we have a 6.6% overall percentage change. Again, our rates are 6.5, but it's kind of a rounding in there. So our goal is to have everybody as close to that 6.6 as we possibly can. Looking at this is pretty great from my perspective, being a rate geek and doing these studies in other places. Generally, we're not this close. There are always little nuances. Again, your demographics haven't changed since the last study significantly. So we have that basis for how we develop this. So what this tells us is that overall, everybody's overall rates are going to go up approximately the same, right? Commercial, not quite as much. Pump zones, a little bit more, again, because of those specific costs. The bottom table is those average unit costs. So going down the residential tier 1, and you'll see the commodity and capacity, a total cost of $1.75. The current consumption rate for tier 1 is $1.34. Tier 2, $2.37 compared to $1.91. So the bold numbers become our year 1 proposed rates as compared to the current rates we have in place. Fixed charge for $108.42 versus the $103.03. So this is where it gets a little bit tricky in our outreach and communication of the impacts of these rates. Overall, we need to generate 6.5% more revenue. But it's going to be different by customer class, and it's going to be different by customer. Somebody may have a decrease in their, well, not in this case. They may have a minimal increase in their rate. Others may have a significant increase in their rate depending on how much water they're using. So that's the key driver and the difference that we're looking at here as part of this. So our cost of service demonstrates the cost basis for each customer class with the development of those unit costs for the meter and consumption charges. And again, Prop 218 limits our ability to smooth and phase these in. There is some ability, but overall we want to stick to what our analysis shows and ultimately reflect industry standard approaches and your, again, unique system and customer characteristics. So now we know our overall revenue needs. We know how we're going to recover them. We can design our rate design. So what's unique is go back many, many years when I first started doing this, and we had our goals and objectives: affordability, revenue stability, and sufficiency. Those are still applicable as part of this, but we have to build them into our cost of service to support the rates we have going forward. So as we think about this, we're still using our cost of service and our unit cost, tier 1, tier 2 for residential, uniform rate for our commercial, and then the pump charge. So again, here's what that looks like. We have our residential customers. The vast majority are 5/8 by 3/4 and 3/4, but we also have some with 1-inch meters. That 103.03 increases to 108.51. So again, that's our fixed charge that everybody incurs for a 5/8 by 3/4. Coming down, the first 8,000 gallons is charged today at $1.34. That would go up to $1.75. And everything over that would go from $1.91 to $2.37. So again, looking at that tier perspective based on the costs incurred to provide that level of water service going forward. And then that carries out through each year. So on the right side, you can see kind of how that bill averages out over time. Our 5,000 gallons there, the second column of blue and black rows, right? Getting up just under $120, $116 and change is what that is. Now, if you're using 30,000 gallons, your bill is going to be up there at $180 going forward. So again, depending on how much water customers use, that's going to drive their individual bill going forward. On the commercial side, we have a much broader meter charge. So we bring this all the way up from a 5/8 by 3/4 up to an 8-inch meter. Again, these increase based on the meter capacity sizes. So the larger the meter, the greater the demands or impacts they can place on the system. That's how we recover those customer or fixed related costs going forward. Same as how you've been doing that in the past. Our consumption charge is a uniform rate, same for all 1,000 gallons. So again, that increases from $1.86 to $1.92. And then you can see kind of what those bill comparisons look like. Again, many of your commercial customers, your restaurants, the grocery stores, they use a lot more water than what our typical residential customer does. Our offices and other businesses that may not have bathrooms or kitchen facilities are going to be on the lower end of our charges here as we look at that total amount. Our pump zone rates, those are based on the specific costs related to the electricity to provide water to different pump zone levels. So 10 or 15 years ago, we changed these. We ratcheted it down to 7. I think we used to have close to 20 of these zones at one point in time. So this is each time it's pumped that would apply to the rate. So if somebody was in zone 1, that's 0. That's our base gravity zone. They're in pump zone 2, there's $1.09 added to each 1,000 gallons that they use in that. Jump all the way up to zone 7, getting up to the top of our pressure zones, then there's a $6.12 charge, and that's increasing. Again, based on the cost of power and those facilities to provide service as part of that. So summary of our rate design, our cost of service unit costs provide the basis for each customer class for that meter charge or consumption charge. Those rates are the rates in year 1. Year 2 through 5 under a 5-year Prop 218 process would be the annual 6.5% increase on those rates. And we have developed them for a 5-year period. And those would be for a proposed, if the board directs staff to go forward, this would be ideally implemented in January of 2026. Now, to do that, this evening, we're here to take input, feedback, some comments from you all on the analysis as we go through this. I will be back here in 2 weeks to talk about any changes or differences. If not, and we're where we are today, then on the September 3rd meeting, then it would be that direction to move forward with the Prop 218 process, mail out that customer notification. We would be looking at holding a public hearing, I think, on November 5th. And if no majority protests, so 50% plus 1 of your customers protest, then the board can adopt those rates that would then be implemented in January as part of this. As part of this, we're working with staff putting together that customer notification. There are a couple new laws signed into place in January that impact this, that we'll be adding to that customer notification related to how customers can provide an objective, a protest and an objection to the proposed rates going forward. So with that, I can turn it over to Mike or Brian or to the directors for any questions on this.
Thank you very much, Sean. Is that the end of the presentation for the
Yes,
moment? So,
I think
so I'm
so.
going to ask for just a quick public comment, if there is any, on this workshop item. It's not, so I don't have to, but I will.
Yeah, I think opening up public comment and questions for Sean. Mike has a kind of a rounding out slides, but we can do that after the discussion and
Okay,
amongst the board.
okay, good enough. So do we have any public comments on the internet? No, okay, very good. Directors, comments and questions from us? Yeah.
I do have one question. Can you go back to the very first slide that had the summary?
Right at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At the beginning.
All right.
Not that beginning. Let's see.
This-
Okay, so key drivers. Where's the inflation? 4 point. Oh, let's see.
4.8% on the O&M side. is what we built in each year in the out years.
So is that included in that 6.5 annual?
Yes.
Okay, so it's the inflation and a 2%
Correct.
increase.
Yes.
That's correct way of reading that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
That sounds a lot better.
Yeah.
I mean, inflation is
Correct.
everybody's accounting for inflation, and so then if it's a 2% increase, to be able to do these things we want to do, the capital improvements, operating, all of that.
Yes, great point.
I just
2/3
wanted
to
to make sure that I was
3/4
reading that correctly.
is inflation impacts, yes.
Okay, that was my only question.
And Mike has some additional supporting data on that, on the budget presentation as it relates to water and electric consumer price indexes in our area. So in addition to inflation, there's also some water utility specific data out there too.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Thank you.
Sean, could you quickly kind of give us a rundown on how you determine the proportionality for the pump zone charges?
Yeah, so within the budget detail, there are costs associated with the pumping of water on the electric side for the different pump stations that bring the water up the hill. And so those costs are identified, and we've taken that, we've kind of worked through this over the years to identify what those are. And then we capture those costs, and they're basically directly assigned to the pump zone charges. So does not impact our residential or our commercial rates at all. It's kind of pulled out in the analysis and goes in its own column right away. So those costs are specific, the electric costs specific to pumping water in those pump zones going forward.
So it's all related to the electric costs, or are there any additional O&M charges in that money, in that?
So it's primarily, I will say, electric. As we go through our cost of service, we allocate costs, which is what bucket does it go in, or columns does it go in. We do sometimes base some of our items in the revenue requirement on all O&M costs, so we may pick up some other additional minor costs, but the vast majority is definitely the electric side of it.
Thank you, Director Laliotis. I'm gonna turn to my right. Do we have questions?
No,
on this
just
side?
a very thorough presentation, thank you.
Yeah, I'm good for now. Thank you. Smoothed out.
Smoothed out.
That's right.
Smooth numbers.
We appreciate the
Well,
smoothing
straightened
of
out.
things. Yeah, Director Laliotis again.
The reserve
Yeah.
smiley, not
The
smiley.
10-year or the
Smiley
5-year?
face.
You know, thank you for
Oh, yeah.
bringing that up.
Actually,
It
yeah.
looks the same. We're always at the beginning of the.
So obviously, we're spending down quicker than we're funding reserves in the first 5 years. How does that balance change in the 10-year?
So we do, so in years 6 through 10, in the model, we do have assumed rate increases. I will correct this if I'm wrong, I believe it's 3.5% to 4% in years 6 through 10. That turns this chart up to get up to our target as part of that.
So that's an additional 3 to 4%,
Yes.
or so you're
After the 5 years of 6.5,
okay.
then that would be followed by 5 years of 3.5 to
Okay,
4%
okay.
based on what we know today.
And then, and then in that you've assumed increases at O&M
Yes.
and increases in capital spending?
Correct. Yeah, so that, to the question on inflation as well, that 4.7, 4.8, that's the average over the 10 years. So we have a little higher inflation now and a little lower in the out years. That's the straight line version of inflation. So as we get outside of this 5-year window, we've kept inflation a little bit lower than what we did up in the front end. And so that's where we can get away with those 3.5 to 4% in the out years as of the cost today, right? Just projecting those out based on assumptions.
All right. And, just from a staff perspective, in the out years, you are confident that the capital spending is meeting our requirements?
Yeah, I think with respect to the curve you see on the presentation right now, and to Director Bender's comment, it kind of looks the same. we have achieved very closely our reserve goals through the water department through the last rate schedule, debt service, and our capital plan. So this is the next lens of that. And one of the things that we have to recognize is Mr. Reed presented our updated 10-year capital improvement plan, which is fairly aggressive. And it's really designed to what Sean talked about at the onset of his presentation. We have an obligation and responsibility to continue to reinvest in our infrastructure at a rate, at least at a minimum, exceeding depreciation and inflation. But also the replacement cycles, the life cycle replacement that Chad talked about in his CIP. What we could do, and we did this in it might have been the last rate study presentation from HDR or the previous one. We took the smiley face, the famous smiley face, and the reserve balance line and played with it a little bit and showed different options where we could stretch out the CIP so that it's not an $8.5 or $9 million a year average investment, trim that out a little bit, see how the impacts are with maintaining the 6.5% rate increase, or adjust both. And we did a little bit of playing around with that before. Staff is very confident in our current CIP as a kind of best case scenario for us that manages rates within kind of the comparative analysis of our neighboring agencies, but also accomplishes what we want to accomplish in terms of capital replacement. We have an aging infrastructure that everyone's talking about regionally and nationally. We have tanks that need to either be replaced or upgraded in size. We have water main replacements that need to be accomplished for one life cycle replacement, but also there's some very aggressive regulatory structure coming upon us in the next couple of years in terms of water loss reductions. So I'm doing a long answer to Vice President Laliotis' question, but staff is confident that with the current CIP and the current rate structure, we can again reach our 5 to 10 year goals of replenishing those reserve balances. And it's another swipe at it. We're not recommending another debt issuance, and we are trying to manage the total annual cost of CIP replacement in kind of a sustainable way.
And have we, in the first 5 years, have we included any capital for the facility master plan?
The facility master plan is going to be in large part funded by the electric utility. Historically, the district has taken the financial approach that the electric utility owned the facilities and the water utility rent a portion of those assets.
And that's built into the operating costs, essentially. Got it. Okay.
Mike will have some updates on our assumptions, key assumptions and projections on rent and things of that nature for both the water utility and the electric side.
Thank you. No, thank you, Sean. Appreciate it, as always. Very thorough.
Yeah, I think I'm good too. I don't think I have any questions at this time either. I'm starting to become more familiar with how this all fits together. That was a really great presentation, by the way. I think it helps us a lot when we talk to our ratepayers when they come and ask us about this and how did we come to these numbers. You know, we don't make it up. There's a lot of data behind it. So thank you for that. Okay.
So what staff would like to hear some feedback from the board on is, we have scheduled for the September 3rd board meeting, workshop number 2 for water rates. Shortly after that meeting, we would need to schedule the public hearing and quickly make public notice. As Mr. Korn presented at the very beginning, Prop 218 has some very specifically called out timelines for public notification and opportunity to protest or object. Staff can come back in the September 3rd meeting with more material for consideration, or we can just recap what we presented this evening, give the board opportunity to kind of ponder and deliberate individually, or we can set up staff workshops individually between now and September 3rd. Kind of looking for some feedback. If you want additional information, we can definitely coordinate that with HDR and Mr. Salmon, or we could anticipate some preliminary approval on September 3rd.
So for all of us here, do we feel confident making a decision with the information that we now have, or do we want more information before we? I feel confident with this presentation that, you know.
I'm good.
Okay, very good.
I just want to say that I feel the budget drivers are clear and in line with the direction that we're moving. So I don't have any issue with what I've seen.
Yeah, I think everything looks great. I think 6.5% is fair. You know, obviously we're spending down a chunk of our reserves in the first 5 years. That, to me, that's the only negative to this plan. I feel like, although at the end of the day, I feel like still having 10 million in the bank in reserves at the end of this downswing is acceptable, and I would assume staff would feel the same way since they presented it that way. So that to me, that's the only thing that kind of sticks out in this 6.5% scenario is if we're comfortable spending down reserves to that $10 million level, which staff's recommendation is that we do that, and that's what was presented tonight. So I'm good with that. But
What were
just
the
making a
reserves,
note.
I mean, like 5 years ago? Or this
They were really low.
significant,
lower.
yeah.
Yeah, if you could put the chart, the smiley face chart that he showed earlier, Sean, next to the one 5 years ago, it would be the similar chart, but I think the bottom would be much, much lower 5 years ago, closer to a million, maybe $1.5 million.
So we've made significant.
So we've made, as
progress.
Brian mentioned, the previous 5 years, we've made good strides, and we actually have a capital reserve in water utility now. There didn't, before that, there was not one, so at least we have that to draw on. So, and the operating reserve is spot on with the policy balance. So yeah, things have improved dramatically over the last 5 years. So that can't be understated. I'll try and reinforce that in the next budget workshop.
So the shape is the same, but the volume is different.
Right. We're at a whole nother level. We actually have reserves.
Yeah.
So,
We're in the playoffs.
we're in the
We made it.
playoffs.
Okay, and that it's important to keep these things in mind, that it's a never-ending process, right? We're always going to need to be funding our system. We're always going to be investing in capital. We're always going to be adjusting the rates. We're always going to have to keep up with inflation. Maybe we get lucky and we don't have 4.7% inflation over the next 5 years.
I just have one other comment about that, and just kind of listening to Tony talk about that 6.5 is that target. It has a very different sound than inflation of 4.8 plus 1.7%. It makes it sound like, oh, it's not really increasing, yet we're doing so much with that, but yet we're accommodating for inflation. So from a communication standpoint, I'm not sure the best way to do that, but it certainly has a very different sound of increase. Inflation, 1.7, someone might say, oh, is that all? Versus, wow, 6.5 sounds like a lot. So just kind of how it's presented or how we want to communicate that.
Great point. We've kind of played around with that over the last 10, 15 years as presenting it as the dollar per unit, the dollar per, the dollar per 1,000 gallons of water consumption. Simply providing that to the public from that perspective, or a percent increased year over year. And we get different feedback from the community, really some wanting just the bottom line it, what's my bill going to be on average with the increase rate, or the percentage. And the percentage is usually more valuable in comparing what other utilities are doing and compared to the economy. And then the dollar value is really, at the end of the day, what the consumer wants to see. What's it going to cost me, and what's it funding. So you're absolutely correct. There's different strategies there, and what we try to do is include both. And there was a great feedback in one of our previous board meetings to offer our community a utility billing 101 course, and through our websites and outreach to kind of explain what that means. So point taken very well, and something we need to consider.
Okay, great.
Okay, to wrap up this item real quickly, just a couple other clarifications. Tentative date for the public hearing was November 5th. We're now thinking that the public hearing for water rates would be November 19th. So just for clarification there. And then just to accommodate the process. And then no direct fiscal impact associated with the workshop tonight. Thank you for the feedback. And yeah, wrapping that up. All right.
We're wrapped up, board-wise.
Yeah.
Staff-wise is
Everybody
wrapped. Okay.
seems like 6.5%. It's pretty good.
It is, when you're looking back at our 99887 over the
Right,
past 5
right.
years. So we're doing better than we were.
That decision speaks for itself.
Yeah, that's right, which is why today we don't have to do that. So, okay, I'm good too. Thank you very much. And we look forward to your next presentation.
Thank you, Sean. I knew I should have gone before Sean. He's a professional. Well done, sir. All right. Good evening again, President Finn, members of the board. This is agenda item number 17, which is a workshop number 2 for budget 26 and 27. As pointed out earlier today, I do have about 53 slides, so I will move relatively fast, and I can stop me if you'd like, if something really doesn't make sense or I went way too fast, or I can come back, after my presentation and hit that slide, that specific slide. I do know remember where most of these are and can come back to them. So, but it is a lot of information, and as you know, it's a big process. It's once every 2 years with the biennial, so it's not every year. So that's pretty awesome. There's a lot of glass half full in this presentation.
Yeah.
Okay.
How's that? So our agenda this evening, consistent with the staff report, is a quick update on the budget timeline, a little assumption update. We're going to talk about overheads, rent, and debt service. We're going to talk about purchase power a bit, capital expenditures, and personnel. So as I mentioned, on July 18th, we had our first workshop. We went over goals, objectives, and key assumptions. Had a good meeting there. And then tonight, the 20th of August, we are having workshop number 2. We'll hit these items. And then the next workshop is actually scheduled for October 15th. And then public hearing and action item on November 5th to review and potentially approve by the board the budget on November 5th. As well as a public hearing on electric rates on November 5th. And then the public hearing for water rates is currently scheduled for November 19th, is what we're going to be asking the board for here shortly over the next few weeks. So as you know, I like this slide. A balanced budget is important, as well as there's so many moving parts and pieces to it. These are just a few pieces of the pie to refresh everyone on that we need to keep in balance. Our goals, our mission, our objectives, strategic initiatives, capital investment, maintaining debt service, ever important personnel and reserves, and of course regulatory impacts. So a lot of moving parts and pieces, but we're getting close. So a few quick updates on CPI and inflation. On the left is the United States CPI-U, W, core, and PCE, personal consumption. And this is a trend by month from January through July of 2025 year-over-year inflation. So we're at 2.7 for the U.S., 3.1 for core, which is upticking the last 2 months. And then PCE is at 2.6. In the center here is San Francisco, Oakland, Hayward, which comes out every other month, is underrunning the United States at currently at 1.5 for U and 1.9 for W inflation rates for June. And then on the far right here is current unemployment rates for the U.S. and California, 4.2 and 5.5 respectively. Relatively stable, but California is upticking just a little bit the last couple months. CPI core is CPIU less all items less food and energy, because those are volatile. So there's some that like to look at without those two items. And then PCE is another one that some look at, personal consumption expenditures. It's no one right answer as to how to look at it, depending on how you want to write your press story about it. Is some ways to look at it. Another Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS, federal tracking is electricity for the U.S. I should mention that they also, until this year, they had a specific metric for San Francisco, Oakland, Hayward, and they stopped producing that metric. I don't know why. I emailed a couple people and got a lot of cryptic answers. But the long story short is it's not available anymore starting January, but it is available for the U.S., and it's at 5.5 year over year for July. And then for the CPI for the U.S. for water, sewer, and trash, which is combined utilities metric CPI that's measured, has been measured for a very long time. The inflation rate is running 5.3 year over year, July. In the attachment 1 in the staff report was another inflation metric. We thought this was interesting. Wanted to share this with the board. This is produced by our National Rural Electric Co-op Association, NRECA, Enrica. And yeah, as you know, transformers and things like that, and particularly during COVID, there was pretty healthy upticks, and those increases have stayed there. They didn't drop down. Let's see. I had a long bulleted list of all the things I covered last workshop. I didn't think that was necessary. I can tell you that nothing has materially changed. I made some fine-tuned things, of course, but there's been no material changes in assumptions that warranted wasting anyone's time this evening. Somehow this got out of order. This is fuel prices. The gap is between national and California's like 43%, I think. So it's a little bit bigger on the far right. You can see the gap between U.S. and California is bigger than on the far left 5 years ago. Vegetation management, I did refine that a little bit. I think when I reported last month, it was flat for 26 and 27, and we do think we need to factor inflation. There will be rates of pay increases for those contractors and their employees, so we figured it's best to budget a slight increase, 3% over budget for 25 for 26, and then another 3% for 27. The 5-year change is 41%, or a 7.2% compounded annual growth rate for the 5 years 2021 to 2026. The 2026 figure amounts to about $12 per month per account, just for reference purposes, spent on wildfire veg contract services. That 2.1 million also represents about 53% of the electric operations specific expenses, vendor expenses, and about 33% of the entire electric utilities annual operating expenses from vendors. Let's see. So now we're going to talk about overheads, water, rent to the electric, and debt service. We're going to talk about overheads because it's kind of a mystical thing, and some people don't even think it's real money, and I assure you it's real money. And if I was to describe overheads at a top level, it would simply be it's just a cost accounting method to distribute costs between electric and water utility. It is real cost. Everything that we're talking about here is a real hard cost. It's just a matter of how you treat that cost. You could just put it in one big bucket called all the things associated with payroll taxes and health insurance and benefits, and that's the number. And split it 50-50 between electric and water and be done. But instead, we have a very sophisticated way here to handle that, and I'll touch on that briefly. But it's very common to do it the way we're doing it, particularly with utilities, because we're setting rates, and public utilities, publicly owned, are going through FERC processes or through CPUC processes. So this is very common in that industry. It's common in the electric utility industry to do these type of overheads. It's just a method of distributing real cost. Okay. So we have four labor head items. Labor overhead is by far our largest item. It's at 11.2 million these are the draft amounts currently for 2026. Transportation overhead is 1.8 million. Administrative overhead is 0.4, and construction overhead is 0.4, so almost $500,000 there. So labor overhead, the rate is right at 92%. It's similar to the current year we're operating in. And what does that mean, the labor overhead rate of 92%? What it means is that for every dollar of productive payroll gross wages paid to an employee for a productive activity, there's 92 cents of costs associated with that dollar of labor. Okay, and I'll go over what those components are. And so PL 92% is an add to PL labor. That's productive labor dollars. And so versus non-productive labor dollars is part of the overhead. I'll cover that next. Transportation overhead of 1.8. That's our maintaining our fleet and generators and trailers and all that stuff, and I'll get into that detail. And that's charged based on labor hours, not my labor hours or Brian Wright's, General Manager Wright's labor hours, but the field ops that are driving the vehicles out in the field. Based on those labor hours, the cost is distributed either to operating expense or to capital projects when they go out and charge labor hours to a capital project. Administrative overhead is basically the warehouse costs and the purchasing agent that's directly behind you that they operate and run the warehouse. That cost is distributed out across all productive labor dollars at 3.6%. And then construction overhead is the administrative time related to administering capital projects that are not directly working on capital projects, but they are involved at a planning level, so there's a little bit there. And that's charged just on labor dollars charged to capital projects when there's labor involved. If we just buy a truck, there's no construction overhead, of course. But when we build and do all the great things that Chad and his team and Mike Swanson and his team do, we're charging construction overhead cost. Labor overhead I mentioned is 11.2 million for 26. It's 48% of gross wages. If you think of just someone's rate of pay or their salary, you would add 48%. But our rate is 92%, and that's because not all work hours, not all paid hours, are productive work hours. There's things called holiday, vacation, sick, etc. So those aren't productive labor hours. Those are non-productive labor hours. So those are part of the labor overhead calculation. The big five items are pension cost at almost $4 million. I'll go over that on the next slide. Medical and dental insurance cost at $3 million. Non-productive labor, I mentioned. PTO, paid time off. Jury duty, be another one. So payroll taxes, as we all know, there's payroll taxes out of your paycheck. There's also payroll taxes that the employer matches. So this is the employer's side of FICA and Medicare at $1 million. And then OPEB, so other post-employment benefits. So this is the health insurance related to our retirees, right? Our cost. And then I put workers' comp on here, even though it's not one of the big five, but it's really good news, right? I talked a couple months ago, Jillian and I talked about workers' comp costs, and our renewal was down, our X-mod was down substantially to like 0.68 from 1.01, something like that. So significant improvement there in workers' comp costs. So great news there, saves us $125,000 in labor overhead. So real money. Other great news, I'll get into that in a minute, medical. So let's see, pension cost is 34% of that 94% overhead rate, 92%, sorry, revised. The classic and PEPRA rates are essentially flat between our percent of payroll and our match and that kind of thing. But there's, as rate of pays goes up, we have to match, the match goes up. And then the unfunded actuarial liability, which is a real cash payment every July, we just recently made those payments in July of 2025, is going up. And so that's another increase in our costs for pension. The reports for 27 are due by the end of August, so we'll know what our UAL is for by the end of August, and then that'll be one of the last pieces to fine tune here for budget. Medical and dental insurance is $3 million in our current draft, and it's substantially less than what we anticipated. I was thinking 7 to 10, and it came in at 4.4. We got that email last week. So really good news on the medical dental front. This is just a couple of, again, our increase was 4.4. On the left is CalPERS. CalPERS Gold is 10.5, and Covered California is 10.3. So just two in the area, in the region, rate increases for health insurance, and ours came in at 4.4. So good news there. This is a summary of all the pieces, not just the big ones, on labor overhead. I mentioned workers' comp, vision, various life insurance and LTD, long-term disability insurance, the longevity change, wellness benefit, and at the bottom there is the non-productive labor cost. Moving on to transportation overhead, sometimes called fleet overhead. So that's the cost of our fleet operations, repairs, fuel costs, insurance, and depreciation. We have about 115 units, but in maintenance repair units, it's closer to 240, maybe even 250. So that's putting everything on this even playing field. Obviously, maintaining a digger derrick is quite different than maintaining a Jeep Cherokee. About $193,000, 12% increase B2B 2025 to 2026. Chunk of it is fuel cost. Still seeing an article a week, if not more, on California's looming price increases due to CARB, LCFS regulatory impacts at the pump, as well as the closure of those two refineries that are going to have a ripple effect on fuel prices in California. So would like to budget that if at all possible. I think that would be the prudent thing to do. We are looking at improving the safety of our winter operations with a pilot program with primarily the water team with studded tires, and that's going to cost some money, adding approximately $35,000. Depreciation went up just based on the type of fleet we have mix going on right now. And then insurance is about double what was in budget. I don't think it's quite double renewal to renewal. I don't have that on my fingertips, but just the renewal last couple of years has been heavy. As we all know, on our personal level, auto insurance has gone through the roof. It's definitely in that CPI top list of inflation rates. It's auto insurance, driven by cost of vehicles, cost of used vehicles, and cost to repair when they get damaged or through the roof, as I understand it. So that transportation rate is charged based on labor hours. As I mentioned, not all labor hours, but labor hours out in the field, and it's going up a fair amount. Administrative overhead, again, is the cost of maintaining the purchasing and warehouse operations, and maintenance and utilities of the building, that side of the building, that kind of thing. And construction overhead is a beast of a calculation that is going from about 20% to about 23% for 2026. Interdepartment rent is, this water, electric owns the building, water pays rent, their fair share of building operations, 50%. I like to think it's their fair share, but water might sometimes thinks differently. It's mainly going up on the depreciation of jointly used assets. This is budget to budget, but refining that depreciation estimate uptick quite a bit. And then this is just water pays 50% of that. So, moving on to debt service. I know this is hard to read, but in the goalpost there is 26 and 27. You can see through 2034, the blues are water's debt service right at 2 million. Then it falls off with just the 2022 COP debt remaining just under $1 million. And then for electric, it is flat at just under about 450,000. I'll cover it on the next slide, and ends in 2047. I did want to point out, and I know there's a lot of numbers just to show off, Sean. I can put a lot of numbers on a screen. No, what I wanted to show is important to understand on this previous debt. I put 2015, 2016 COP debt. I think that's like really 2006 circa. I think we refinanced in 2015, 2016. But it's important to know that back then, part of that debt, a portion of that debt service was because taking over the Donner Lake system costs more than the Donner Lake Assessment District charged. And so there's a Donner Lake surcharge that was added, $6.75, something like that, almost $7 a month, and that ends in 2035. And then there's also a portion that paid for expansion through facility fees. So the net is, there's about 500,000 that's paid through, not through rates, because we just talked about rates, right? And Sean and I've talked about this, he factors this, what I'm showing you here now, is there's about 500,000 that's of that debt service that's not paid by rates, it's paid by other sources of funds, facility fees and the Donner Lake surcharge. So the net debt service over here on the right is, the debt service is almost 2 million, but what we're paying with rates is about $1.5 million. So just for grins. Moving on to purchase power. So in order to establish our purchase power requirement budget for 2026 and 27, you have to understand, similar to Sean with the rate setting, we have to understand how many customers we're going to be serving in those 2 years. And so this is simply my roll forward of where we're at currently with customers, and assuming the 5-year average is 1.2 for electric, conservatively using 0.9, and then for water, the 5-year average is 0.8, conservatively using 0.6. Gets us to our customer counts, average customer counts. And as you know, the customer count's different in January than it is in December, so we use an average for the year for our billing estimates. So the other thing we look at is how much KWH we're selling. This is average KWH billed per billing day, because not every month is the same. Some billing months for a cycle are 28. You see this on your personal bills. Some days the bill's 28 days on the month, and the meter reads different the next month, and it's 33 days. And it's like, why can't it just be the same every month? And I don't know, but it has something to do with the days of the week, right? They're not always the same. So we'll work on that. But in the meantime, when we distill it down, KWH billed per billing day, you can see the gray bars are 2025, and they're really not popping. They're not substantially more kWh, and sometimes they're less in the per month. And the blue bars are 2023 and a big winter, all right? That force that. But if you look in May, June, and July, the per billing day, now this isn't demand. Demand is a very different conversation, right? Very different conversation. Jared yells at me all the time. I'm starting to get it. I actually brought it up, so it's starting to click. So this is not KW, this is KWH, all right? More on KWH, showing something similar, just that, the gray dots are right in with the averages, and actually May, June, and July are actually slightly below the per account averages. So people are not consuming from a volume standpoint. The demand might be there, and they plug an EV in and hit it on supercharge, but overall their utilization for electricity is not moving at a large pace. So taking a 3-year average as well as looking at the last 12 months of megawatt hours that we've purchased, coming up with about 180,000 megawatt hours, 1% over the 3-year average to accommodate for customer growth. But not a lot of factoring there for demand growth on a KWH side, megawatt hours purchased. And then just still in that, so now that we have that amount of volume that we need to budget, we think we should budget. We also looked at the various costs, where we're going to get that 180,000 megawatt hours. So we know certain things about certain sources. Sometimes we're using a 3-year average here. Sometimes we're using a different figure because of changes. I'm not currently putting any TCID because that's kind of fallen off. Stampede, the last 12 months is kicking at 15,000 megawatt hours, but the 3-year average is 9.6. We're using a three-year average. No right answer there, but we don't necessarily want to budget a spike year for Stampede. We should budget a 3-year average. We had to replace TCID, so that's hitting the pool. Nebo is a 3-year average. Horse Butte's a 3-year average. Vayo is a 3-year average, but I'm not looking at this year because Vayo's been down for 4 months, maybe even 5. So Red Mesa, we have some data now, so putting in the estimate there. And then the same thing on cost per megawatt hour. I'm looking at the 3-year average as well as what the trend is the last the last 12 months to get the best of the two averages, talking with Jared a little bit. And so we'll refine this as we get through the next month or so, but I think this is pretty close. And the good news here, again, glass full, not even half full, is that this is about $1 million less for 2026 than 2025's budget figure, okay? So substantially less budgeted power cost. And that is due to trends in power costs since we did the last budget. We've talked about this several times in PCAs. We had a PCA in the consent calendar this month. So that will help with other cost pressures on the electric utility and electric rates. I thought this was interesting, so I just threw it on here real quick. This is 2 years. This is a daily report from UAMPS on future power market, and on the top page is from 2 years ago, mid-August, and the bottom is 2 years ago, this August, or a couple days ago, right? And I'm seeing hundreds and 96s, 116, $100 here. These are Palo and mid-Cs and stuff. So, and I'm not seeing anything really close to the hundreds right now. Now, this could change tomorrow. So it's a futures market, it's a commodity. But as current forecasting, this is going out, the next 12 months, the forecasting is not telling us anything dramatic. But as we know, that could change. We have a rate reserve utilization in 2023 of a net 1.8 million. Our plan in current budget was a recovery over 5 years. I think we can detune that. Our balance, our policy, if we're going to budget less purchase power, our policy balance, 50% of that is less. And so now we're closer to the target. And then also, we had a PCA credit over almost 190,000, I think it was, last cycle on the PCA. So our shortfall in that reserve balance is down to 316 forecasted at the end of the year. So that's great news. So we'll cover that in 26, and we could actually just lower the plan through 28 and make that 100,000, 105,000 each year. But I don't think we're going to need to do that. But it's a tool in the quiver if we need to. Cap and trade AB 32s. The good news there is sales have been a little stronger than anticipated in the budget. And so we'll be able to utilize for Horse Butte Wind about 50 grand in both 2026 and 27, 50 grand more, in those 2 years than anticipated in the previous budget cycle. So good news there. Shifting gears to capital expenditures. Utilities are a capital-intensive business. I've said this many times. Sean touched on it a little bit. There's no doubt about it. And the good news is the expenditures have a long useful life and benefit when we do it, right? And that's why you can pay for it with debt service, because it has a life. The debt service has a life of 30, and maybe the capital improvement has a life of 30 or 40 or 50 years. So you spread that cost. We have regulatory and wildfire matters impacting capital expenditures as well. This is just a reminder. I went through this a couple months ago, I think, when I updated on the 2024 numbers, the size and scope of the electric and water utility. Net capital assets, 68 million for electric and 87 million for water. When you take that net capital assets and divide by gross assets, you get it down. That's a ratio for electric of 64 and 55 for water. That's going down, not up. So things are depreciating. That's kind of what's left. It's 55% left for water and 64 for electric. And now that's a book accounting metric. It's not that the tank stops working or the pipe clogs up or the power poles start falling down, but it is a measure. It's a metric, right? So we've talked about capital improvement plans for water, and electric has drafted one as well. The electric one does include some facility, building infrastructure, capital expenditures. We'll cover that in a second. So about 13 million average for 13.5 million for electric, $75 per account per month, and for water, 8.6 million or $52 per account per month. Now, these are all in cost. This is not just electric system and water system. This includes IT. This includes vehicles, and anything else that's capital related. This is a summary of the first 5 years that's in your packets for the capital expenditure detail. And I'm not going to read through each of these, but the highlights, is about $6 million per year, a little over $6 million, growing with inflation for about 6 miles of overhead each year, system hardening and reliability upgrades. There is $2 million in 28 and $2 million in 29 for the BESS. You've heard about the BESS. It was in the previous capital plan, so it's moved out, but it's still there. We are planning to figure something out there. The Martis Valley substation, which is underway and going well, is going to finish up in 2026, so there's a nice chunk of $3 million. Pole line sensors and SCADA and grid modernization. I can't tell you how many grid modernization emails I get a day. It is a hot theme. There's no doubt. And so we have $1 million a year budgeted there. That's system improvement. That's reliability improvement. That's direct to the customer.
So let's spam his work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I just threw it in there. That was a good one. This does include, let's see. So the highlight here is, I just highlight it because that's kind of an IT project. IT's taken the lead on this. This is the SRIP fiber. Many of you have heard of this project before. This is completing the fiber loop, and we've got 3 more phases to knock this out. $2,750,000 estimated for 26, and then skip a year, $2 million in 28, and $2 million in 30. And this is the fiber loop improvement project completion, and IT's taken the lead. I'm hearing we're going to potentially, try and go out to bid this fall for this 26 project. So that's moving along and being planned and actively being planned. So that's great news. You can see a 10 million here. That's the 10-year total, and that's AMI meters. So we got to replace our meters. They are going to start failing, and so that starts in 2030. I believe it's spread over 5 years. So anyway, just a couple of highlights there, and then I do have land and building from capital reserves in 26 and 27 of 2.5 million each. Just a placeholder. No idea where that's going to end up going, and there are good plans to upgrade the infrastructure here for EV charging. It's going to take some money, but most of that, if and when we move to a new facility through the facility master plan, we could pick it up and take it with us. So a good portion of it, that cost. We talked about water a fair amount. We've had a workshop on it. At least one workshop. Yeah. It's starting to blur. So I'm not going to dive into this too much. If there's questions at the end or now, I can entertain those. Just to point out, beyond the system, there's also water SCADA. There's asphalt. There's close to, I think it's 46, 47 sites, and all of those have asphalt. And if you do nothing and don't touch them, it will degrade and fall apart, and it'll be not good. So you got to maintain that. So we've got to budget some overlays. I'm not talking about a slurry seal. Of course, we do that when necessary, every year, if not every other year, something like that. But this is a full overlay, which is necessary. And I'm going to get the square footage for you because it's a lot. Let's see. And this is the kind of the detail on the projects in 26 and 27. Again, this is in the staff reports. 7.8 million in 26 and 8.0 million in 27. IT projects, overall, this is pretty similar to past capital projects. They had the SCADA strip project here. I moved it over to electric just so people wouldn't freak out on IT cost. And then the GIS upgrade is planned for a GIS upgrade is planned. And then there's a hyper-convergent infrastructure replacement in 26 for $200,000. I look forward to hearing what the heck that's all about. But apparently it's up for replacement. I haven't had a chance to connect with Scott. Maybe we could ask him that question. And then the infamous fleet replacements in 26 and 27 are presented here. All years are in the staff report. We are going to replace the Jeep Cherokees, model year 2014 and 2015. They were in the last budget cycle, but we didn't get to it for various reasons. But we will replace those vehicles with something, and we'll be bringing that to the board with the game plan. Other exciting stuff in here, dump truck. Yeah. Trailers. That's the replacement. What we replace it with is something similar, but it may not. Yes. And then personnel, full-time equivalents, budget 24 was 83.5, 83 in 2025. We're currently drafted at 81 for 26 and 27. We've had quite a few meetings, discussions, and we'll continue to arm wrestle on these based on various pressure points. But how we get there from 83 to 81 is we're currently in the draft is we have removed 4 positions, the electric third operating crew. That was budgeted for 24 and 25, and we've never executed on that. We've never hired that personnel, and we don't have the equipment to do it, and what equipment we ordered has got delayed. So we are not proposing for the current cycle, 26 and 27, to budget that third crew. Perhaps in an out year, maybe starting in 28, but there's a lot of moving parts and pieces to all that, and we can talk about that some more if you'd like. But again, this is a B2B discussion, not a reduction in force or anything like that. We've never had those 4 positions, and we're just saying we're not going to budget those 4 positions. And then we do have electric ops +1 planned, and then just 1 placeholder for another position. So that nets to the 81. And there is no direct fiscal impact associated with this workshop item. Our decisions over the course of these workshops and our final approval do impact 26 and 27's rates, of course. So the recommendation this evening, Part A is, and only Part A, is to receive the information from this workshop item and provide strategic direction to staff regarding budget 2026 and 2027 preparations. The staff report had a Part B, and I need to delete that because this is a workshop and not an action item, so we can't do Part B tonight. My apologies, but you will see that item on the 9-3 agenda that's coming shortly to schedule the public hearing for budget approval. So with that, I will turn it back over to President Finn for questions from the public and our directors.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mike. Do we have any public comments on this workshop item? It appears that we do not, which brings us to our directors. And if we have questions or comments, this would be a great time to hear them. Okay. No?
I just want to say thank you for the detailed reports and workshops tonight. It really, I don't have a lot of questions, so I think that's good because the information's there. We're feeling comfortable about the rate studies that we've done and all the information presented. So I just want to thank everybody for this really good detailed information. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Bender. I did fail to mention there is an active electric rate study ongoing, as you know as well, that is working in tandem with this process. And Sean and I talk way too much every week, and between electric and water, and so things are moving. There's a lot moving right now, and we'll all come together here this fall. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bender. Director Randall, you're good? Okay, very good. To the left?
No, echo Jeff's comments. No, very well done. Good numbers. I appreciate it's good to know that what you're presenting here has been integrated into the rate study. So those two things are talking to each other, and the numbers we're seeing in these two presentations, are molded together, and that's the information we need to make these decisions. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Leliotis.
Comment. Martina, thank you for providing this so I can write notes on it and have it here and refer to it back again. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Mike, awesome as always. Did I hear you say, and I was trying to, as I was flipping through it, because I can't remember what page number it is, that in this budget, there's an overall inflation of 3%. Did I hear something like that? Oh, budget inflation of 3%. Something like that?
There is where the model for the next year, the second year of the budget, 2027, has an overall inflation factor of 3% unless something gets overridden based on knowledge that we have otherwise. And then so again, this would be for vendor expenses. For merit increases, we kind of know where that's at least for rep at 4.0% and 4.0%, 26 and 27 respectively. And then for inflation for vendor expenses, the baseline is 3, and then we override where necessary.
Okay, so I did remember that right. So based on the last presentation we just heard, where the inflation value was 4.8% and yours is 3, why the difference? It's just because we're talking about oranges and apples, or why would one inflation rate be higher than something else for our overall budget?
Good question. It's primarily due to if no one puts in the right figures, it's going to add 3% versus with the current draft, it's closer to the 4.8% overall. So we're looking at, again, the 3% is more for the second year, 27, but his average is a little bit higher than mine currently for conservative reasons. But we'll be refining that as we go forward in my presentation, my information, as well as his.
Okay, great. I was just paying attention, so I caught that detail. Thank you.
That good? Anything else? Okay, I don't have any questions on this presentation either. There was a lot of detail, and it was a lot of detail in our packet, and I think I'm, at the moment, okay. All right, right on. Whoa, what am I knocking over? So that was, wow, where are we? In my head. That was the second sort of information dump of the evening. We're moving on to our third one. Does anybody need a little break? Do we need to stand up for a second? 8 o'clock? I guess we don't. It's not really that late. Okay, very good. Item number 18 on tonight's agenda, workshop on advanced power line safety settings. So we're going to learn something that I'm less familiar with.
All right. Good evening, Director Finn, members of the board. My name is Josh Campbell. I'm the Senior Electric Engineer for the district. As Director Finn mentioned, tonight's presentation is workshop item number 18 on advanced power line safety settings. I will be referring to this as APSS during my presentation. There's one too many. All right, we'll start with background. Wildfire threat is nothing new, not to us, not to the West Coast in general. It's one of the largest issues today that we face. There's a whole laundry list of fires that could be on that slide, but there have sadly been ones that have been caused by electric utility infrastructure, billions of dollars in damages, and unfortunately the loss of life as well. Accordingly, wildfire mitigation is a big number in resource allocation across utilities, really across the country, particularly in the western U.S. That includes vegetation management, system hardening, and also the design and implementation of new technologies. Some of the different things that we use as part of wildfire mitigation strategy. If you look at the bottom of that slide, what's in red there, protection really is how we change and help address wildfire mitigation through operating our protection system differently. And as boxed in the red there, APSS is the district's program that falls under the fast trip settings bullet. So a high level introduction to how the system protection works here at the district. Normal operation, you could also call this winter operation.
more or less. Particularly during the winter months, we use equipment to help minimize outages. Top right there is a recloser control, which is the primary brains behind our electronic protection. The bottom right there is a recloser mounted in a pull-top configuration or a field recloser. And on the left is a stand-mounted or pad-mounted recloser that it serves as a substation protection. We don't have any yet. There are also pad mount versions of these, the green boxes, probably coming at some point soon. Indistinguishable, of course, from our other pad mount green boxes, switches, and transformers and the like. Electronic protection, we have the ability to automatically use reclosing functionality. 80% of overhead outage or faults in the overhead system are temporary. Vegetation, wildlife, things of that nature that make contact and don't sustain it. And so in normal operation, we would like for that not to be a sustained outage. And so these devices have settings that enable that to close in automatically after a few seconds, give the fault time to clear, and hopefully then restore power to where you only see a blink instead of a prolonged outage. About 2019, the first wildfire mitigation plan in the district, we started using what's industry calls it non-reclose. Around here we tend to call it one-shot during fire season. So usually May, June, till snow on the ground, we use a different setting because we do not want to cause fires with our equipment. So part of that is we don't use reclosing in the summer. And part of that being obviously a sustained fault, we do not want to re-energize in that and cause the opportunity for ignition. So we disable our reclosing schemes and we use a less sensitive protection setting. And the reason for doing that, if you only have one opportunity to isolate a fault, you want to minimize where that outage is. So if it's on a tap line downstream and it's not the entire circuit, we would like to have the downstream fuse blow, isolate a small area that's necessary to clear the fault, and we'd like to have the rest of the circuit remain energized. Fast Trip, or APSS, as we're referring to it for the district's program. This is a new program, something that we would be looking to use in periods of elevated fire risk. Same thing, we don't want reclosing in the summer. We want to minimize the ignition risk from our equipment. The difference between this and one-shot is this uses very sensitive settings. And the reason for that is ignition of materials by underneath our facilities or around our facilities is predominantly judged by the instant energy released by that fault. There will be some videos that I'll show you later in this presentation that do a good job of representing what that looks like for an actual event in a testing environment. But we want to minimize that and have, in these periods of elevated risk, we want to minimize that liability of causing an ignition. Last one is not really a system protection item, if you will. The board has seen a number of presentations around preemptive power shutoffs in recent months. If there is a situation that is essentially imminent risk of wildlife or vegetation, usually this is vegetation with high winds. It's a last resort strategy. If it's de-energized, then the risk of ignition is nearly eliminated. So how does APSS work? On the right, it's called a time current characteristic, or TCC. Those curves are how almost all protective devices in electric distribution systems work. On the left is a time, and on the bottom is current. So essentially, the larger the fault current that is detected by the device, the faster it reacts to it. So if I were to take those curves and move them towards the upper right, they would be less sensitive. If I move them to the bottom left, top right is more sensitive. Bottom left, I'm messing that one all up. Let me start over. Top right is less sensitive. Bottom left is more sensitive. And so Under one-shot or non-reclose settings, for certain situations, the protections equipment could take up to 10 seconds to clear a fault. Obviously, this varies based on what the fault is, what it consists of, and where. APSS, the goal is clear under 1 second. In most scenarios, not all, but most of them, that can be done in 1/10 of a second. Sensitive settings, they have to be customized to each device, and the change between the one-shot setting and the APSS setting, they by and large do not coordinate whatsoever with downstream devices. In other words, the APSS device needs to operate faster than the downstream fuse. Only designed to be active during high fire risk periods. The board recently approved a contract with CloudFire, risk mitigation and wildfire consultant. That's something that we'll be using not only to monitor conditions and establish thresholds, but to tailor approaches to certain areas where we would use these settings only in certain areas that would be affected by high fire risk. Obviously, some of the other things that are under that consideration, red flag conditions, weather, particularly wind speeds, and burn index as to how dry the fuels are and how likely they are to ignite. Why should we use it? This has become industry standard or best practice, particularly in the state of California. They all call it something different. Fast curve, enhanced power line safety settings, goes by a number of names. I heard at a conference earlier this week, I heard that there was a speaker that was calling it Quick Trip. They're all different flavors of the same thing. As I mentioned previously, we want to reduce the incident energy from faults that do occur in the electric system with the direct connection of reducing the probability of ignition. The bottom bullet is quite possibly one of the most important. This represents a tool for the district to address high fire danger without using a preemptive power shutoff. It's kind of an intermediate step where it's definitely a better risk mitigation approach where appropriate than just leaving it in one shot and letting what happens. There will likely in the future be scenarios where the weather and the fuels do justify a preemptive power shutoff, but that will be based on thresholds that we'll work with CloudFire, the consultant, to establish. Impact to customers. When these settings are active, predominantly, the real purpose of this is to reduce fire risk when and where it's necessary. With that said, APSS, the initial implementation that we are looking to do is at the circuit level. So when these outages do occur from these settings, they're likely to be larger. Circuit level outage instead of a fuse level outage or even a field recloser level outage. As such, they're likely to last longer when they do occur. Patrol requirements in fire season, we want to patrol the entire line, make sure that we've identified and repaired any damage, and made sure that there's no longer, what initially caused the fault is no longer present when we re-energize and restore power. We'll work to minimize the impact of these. Like I said previously, we'll only be using it when it's necessary, with the same considerations with weather, burn index. We'll also be working in the future to develop smaller areas of activation. So for some of our circuits, they go through multiple different construction types, neighborhoods. They might go through an area closer to the substation where it's underground construction and doesn't really have the fire risk associated with it. And we would be looking to perhaps isolate the overhead portion that's past that and only apply these settings to that portion, thus reducing the impact not only from an outage that is orchestrated by these settings, but also keeping people who don't have the fire risk in that area, where possible, we want to address that. All right, these are some testing videos from High Voltage Test Facility. The first several here that I'll show you These are time synchronized. So on the left is a fast trip setting, and on the right is a normal setting. This first one is an overhead portion of line that they are inducing a line-to-line fault with a tree branch across 2 of the phases. The first several here do not have sound. It's video only. And we'll see if it works. So on the right there, that's an arc flash that extends out almost to the other structure. This is a close-up of the same thing. It's close enough to see some of the particles that are coming off of these tree branches. Now this third one, that's an energized conductor, distribution voltages, so probably 15 kV or some variant thereof that they're dropping. This is sod that's been dried to a certain moisture content. Again, the fast trip is on the left and normal is on the right. And you can see that it actually ignites the grass under the normal conditions. These last videos, these were taken by staff at the same test facility. They are not going to be synchronized, so I'll play one and then the other. There is sound in here, so you'll hear an individual counting down and a noise when he closes and activates the circuit, and with the associated response. Again, same thing, fast trip on the left, or APSS if you want to call it that, normal on the right.
3, 2, 1, closing. 2, 1, energizing the line.
And you can note the change in duration between the two. All right, next steps. Staff will continue to work with CloudFire. We want to refine those weather and risk thresholds for activation. That will be in conjunction with the same thresholds for PPS implementation. There's a draft APSS SOP already done. We'll be working to finalize that. And then staff will also be creating APSS settings and profile for each of the devices that we're planning to implement this on. This is a workshop item. There is no direct financial impact associated with it, but staff requests the board to provide input and direction. And with that in mind, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Campbell. Okay, very good. Do we have any public comment on this workshop item? Seeing none. Do we have any comments or questions? Board? Yeah.
Implementation or switching from wintertime to one shot and one shot to APSS, is that all done remotely? Or does staff have to visit each device?
Currently, it is not. It may be done so in the future, but under current, it's not. It's a trip, physical trip for staff to go and adjust what profile each device is in.
How many devices approximately do we have?
There are 17 substation reclosers, and then there are about 10 to 12 field devices that are visited under one, going normal to one shot and vice versa. The current implementation as planned for APSS is to do it at the substation level. As I mentioned previously, that will likely change in the future once we've worked with our consultant to identify some of the areas that we could possibly zoom in on and only do it to a smaller section of a circuit as necessary.
With that quantity in our entire system, is that something staff is comfortable with, or is that something in the future we can anticipate expanding the use of those devices?
There was an item on the capital in Yeah, there's been a number of things, but on the capital plan, there's a plan to add more reclosers in the system for a number of reasons. APSS is really just a settings addition to the settings design that would need to be done on those devices prior to deployment.
Thanks.
Thank you, Director Laliotis. Director Morrell, are you good? You guys are good? I just wanted to just mention at the UAMPS conference, this sort of evolution is a huge topic of conversation. I mean, a lot of time was spent in the past 2 days at that conference talking about these sorts of grid hardening safety precautions that are evolving pretty dramatically. They spent we had a, I don't know, half-hour presentation on a new tech called Gridware, where they put cameras on the, throughout the system, and you can really see what's going up. It's really fascinating, and it's a really important part of the environment that we find ourselves in right now. Obviously, an ounce of prevention, pound of cure sort of situation. So I really appreciate these steps that we are taking to continue to make our system safer and safer in less safe times. So
and more
thank you.
reliable. So really
And more
appreciate.
reliable.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
cool technology to implement
Super cool
to
technology.
keep us all safe, but yet turn on the power quick. So really nice. Good to see the visuals too. Yeah.
Very good to see. I really appreciate that. It makes it understandable to me, like what exactly is happening. And also another opportunity for more education to our constituents. If these are going to end up with some slightly longer, slightly larger outages, it's, really nice to explain to people what's going on here. This is not, like, we did this on purpose so that things don't burn down. It's not a reliability. It doesn't really fall under the reliability, we're unreliable. No, it's kind of exactly the opposite. It's making us more reliable. So anyhow, thank you very much for that presentation. That was very fun. We have that. And did I ask for public comment? I did. Okay, good. That's all good. In which case, thank you so much for your time and your information. And that's the end of the meeting. Wow, that's amazing. It wasn't a record, but that was a lot of information. So we are going to adjourn. I'm going to gavel us out.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Excellent. Good job.